Hello and welcome to another My Fastest Mile Hangout. Mark Upton, and with me in person today, something a bit different, Al Smith. Hello. With us today we're speaking with Graeme McDowall and Peter Arnott. Welcome, guys.
Morning.
Maybe if you tell us a little bit about yourselves and your background. Graeme, start us off.
Okay, thanks for that, guys. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm a full-time lecturer in golf and sports coaching at a place called the SRUC, which is excuse me, Scotland's Rural College, it's called, and we mainly deal with young people who are looking to have a career either in the golf kind of professional coaching industry. Some of them, if they're good enough, they'll go on and try and be players, and we try and support them with that. And also individuals who are looking to work in sport more generally. I'm also a qualified golf pro myself. I'm a member of the PGA in Great Britain. Prior to coming into academia, if you like, I was a full-time teaching professional. So I did that for about 10 years and then moved over to the kind of teaching, research side. Currently doing a PhD in the areas around nonlinear pedagogy, which is kind of the constraints-led approach, nonlinear pedagogy, that kind of thing.
Excellent, mate. We're sure to be discussing a little bit more about that. Pete?
Pete, yeah. So I've come through Graeme's teaching, shall we say, right? And I am a full-time golf coach in Edinburgh, Crickmillar Park. I'm doing a part-time master's in skill acquisition by research, mainly on representative task design, interviewing tour pros on kind of what happens on tour to kind of what word am I looking for? To inform the practice environment that we create, that Graeme and I create for the project that we're just about to talk about as well, hopefully. In a previous career, I used to be a project manager in geographical information systems. Yeah, so I suppose we better get started. Yeah, it's just a brief overview of what my career.
Cool. Thanks, mate. So I guess we've established it's probably golf that we're going to be talking about today, based on what we've heard from you guys, and particularly, obviously, I know Al and I are really interested in the skill acquisition project, as you're calling it, which is an intriguing title, but doesn't necessarily give a lot away. So can you talk us through a little bit about the background, the thinking behind it, and what that actually is?
Yep, shall I start off, guys, on that?
Sure, mate.
Okay, so the skill acquisition project, you're right to say it's a working title. It's probably not even a great title. It probably doesn't actually capture what we're doing, but you know, we had to call it something. Ideally, we would have called it nothing, but you know, it's hard to do that. And it really was just to capture people who have either been in the formal system, who couldn't get in the system, who have been in the system and come out again, who we're needing some support, and we're probably languishing around the sort of peripheries of golf in Scotland. And initially people started kind of approach us when they kind of maybe tuned into some of our conversations on the various media out there in terms of social media, etc., etc. Players would come along and kind of train with a program that started originally with my students at the college. We had a high performance golf program. We're using the constraints-led approach. Pete, as he said already, he was a student with us at the time. He wasn't good enough to be in the program, can I just say, in terms of playing ability.
That's fine, Graeme. I'm happy with that. And no aspirations to play.
But you know, he's one of these. So he's one of these guys who was switched on enough to think, you know, I'll come along and I'll observe what's going on. I'll start to get myself upskilled in terms of research and study, and he did all that, and he came through our program and our link with Aberdeen University, and he would come along and he'd watch the sessions, and then, you know, better golfers and sometimes pro golfers would ask if they could come along and train with our guys. So the whole thing kind of emerged out of that, and that was the kind of early foundations of the thing. And just as it was very emergent, as you can imagine, we didn't really set off with any particular particular goal in mind. But what's kind of become apparent is more and more people have gravitated towards the program, if you like. And you know, we were discussing earlier that we would call this a non-system, in the sense that it's not a uniform system. People can access it as and when they want. You know, nobody is formally part of this system. Nobody is has to meet any particular criteria. If they turn up to train, they turn up to train. You know, nobody's ever asked to leave the system, if you like. Some people might want to do extra sports science stuff like strength and conditioning. Some guys might not want to do any of that. So there's no prescription. It's very much self-directed, and we're there, if you like, applying our knowledge and skills of the theory of skill acquisition, and hence why it's probably called the Skill Acquisition Project. But that's a very rough overview, and we can go into that in much more detail as we go on, guys.
Yeah, just to add, the level of player at the moment is just kind of, what we call elite amateur and kind of pros that we're working at the moment,
Yeah.
That have come, a lot of them have come from
there's
the talent development system.
They have, and there's several of the people who are doing it who are actually in the system.
Yeah.
Who are actually part of the formal talent development system in Scotland, who are also coming along training in this system. So that's been kind of nice to see.
So, Graeme, it might be a slight divergence, but it might be useful just to have a very brief understanding of what that talent development system is and looks like and does as a reference point to what you're doing alongside it.
Yeah, that's no problem. I'll do that. I mean, I think our talent development system would probably be much like any other country's talent development system, and it's kind of those who show early promise are typically endowed with the resources to continue to show promise. So, you know, if you've had some early success, it's likely that you'll be invited into the system at a fairly young age. Typical pyramid. So by the time you get to the top of the pyramid at an elite level, there's probably only maybe between 6 and 10 players who are really at that elite peak of the thing. But I would say it's one of the things that became obvious to us is that there was a lot more people out there needing support than just these people who were going through the traditional system. So as I mentioned there, you would come into the system because you show some early promise. You would then be given extra support, extra coaching, extra practice time, the opportunity to do extra preparation for tournaments. You know, so there'll be a small band of golfers in Scotland who will be more prepared for tournaments than other golfers, just because they have been privileged with the resources because they've shown some early promise. And that obviously cuts off a whole lot of other people. And I think they call that the Matthew effect, don't they? It's the kind of the rich get rich and the poor get poorer kind of thing, and it's a similar sort of thing. We see it all the time, I think, and you guys will know all about that. So we were finding a lot of golfers floating around the periphery who'd either been in that pyramid and come out of it, who'd been in the pyramid and been quite successful and come out of it to try and turn professional, and all of a sudden the constraints of professional golf were quite different to the constraints or the information that they were exposed to in the formal system. And there's been this real problem, and I don't know if you've kind of picked up the media aspect of things, that, you know, Scotland currently don't have any players on the European Tour under 30 years of age. Okay, so and yet we tend to produce world-class amateurs, you know, amateurs that can go and win world championships and European titles, etc., etc. So there's a really interesting space there somewhere to try and contribute, if you like, to that situation. I think I would also say, though, it's our opinion, or certainly my opinion, that the formal system in Scotland is a good one, and it seems to do what it sets out to do, which is to, you know, produce very, very good golfers, and it appears to do that. And you know, there's some very, very good coaches working in that system, but there does seem to be this transition problem, and also the fact that the formal system can only support so many people because of the obviously it's only resourced to a certain extent. I'm quite sure if you said to Scottish Golf, you know, we're going to double your resources, they'd be quite happy to double the amount of people they bring in. So it's not certainly a criticism of the system as such. The system is the system because of the resources they have to work with, I guess, to a large extent.
Yeah. But I think there's something really interesting in there around the idea that I think you just said, the it does what it sets out to do, and of course what it sets out to do is to set a goal of developing a small number of professional golfers at the elite level. So I'm interested in comparison. You said your project isn't goal directed, but what is it directed by? What are you setting out to do? Or if I ask that another way, what purpose are you trying to serve with this thing?
Okay. Do you want me to take that, Peter? Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, on you go. I'm not entirely sure of that. The answer to that.
That's fine. I mean, I can tell you what. I know what my why is, if you like, for this. Why I'm doing it. It gives us first and foremost, and I'm maybe going to look at more of how this thing has emerged to the stage it's got to. But my why for this was the ability to test our theories on high-level performers and get some very good specific feedback from them. And that's kind of my why. And I know Pete's why is very similar to that. So we can set up constraints-led sessions and camps and put very, very good golfers through this and get their feedback. And that's great for us in our development and the development of our expertise. Would be something there that would be certainly why I'm doing this. In terms of the kind of, saying it's not goal directed and anything like this, what happened actually is I was, sometime last year I was doing some work with a bunch of coaches, and one of the guys was a member of the Dutch PGA, and he started to tell me about what they were doing in Holland, and that, and again he started to tell a very similar story, and that the system can only support so many people, etc., etc. And he was very interested in talent development, and I think that's why we come to this, is because we're first and foremost just interested in this. And he was talking about getting some support to a bunch of players who, again, were either in the system or couldn't get in the system or come out of the system. And he started to tell me how they were going to do it, and they were going to do it by getting the support to these guys at no charge. It's free. Because they wanted to give something back. They wanted to put something back into the system. And one of the things that became obvious there is there's always a major cost implication of these level of players who are trying to make it as players, and then can't really afford support, if you like. And he was talking about what they were trying to do in Holland, which was to invest their time, put a value on that time, and then down the line, if it was quite successful and people thought they were getting better because of it, they would then go and ask somebody to match that figure. So if they had put in 100 hours over the year, and there was 5 coaches putting in 100 hours, they might put a value of €30,000 on that, and then say, well, down the line, if you want to keep this system going, somebody needs to match that with some sort of sponsorship, and we'll put that money back into the system and back into the players, and just try and grow a system from the ground up. So it's a bottom-up approach. It doesn't really need somebody coming along and saying, okay, here's a load of money in the first place, go and do this. The system in the first place would show that it can be a success, and that it can be viable, and it can work by people just putting their time back into the system, almost like volunteers. But we'd like to think we're volunteers with some real specialised knowledge, which is interesting as well, because if you think about, certainly with golf in Scotland, the introductory level there's quite a large volunteer workforce, and I think across sports in general there'll be a large volunteer workforce trying to grow the game at the bottom level, and then at the top level it becomes very specialised and, if you like, more expensive, and again that's probably a barrier to some extent to some people's continued development in their sport. So I just thought that sounded like a good idea, and let's give up some of our time, put a value on that time, and then in the future go to other people and say, look, would you be willing to give up some of your time as well, and go to different facilities and say, well, guys, would you let us use your facility 5 times a year? And this is why we're asking you to do that, because it's to help all these guys out that seem to be lost to the sport every year or every generation. And that's the plan. We're not there yet. At the moment, we're just putting our time into this, so that in the future we've got the stories of the players, and also the value that we can attribute to the time we've put in, and hopefully bring other people into the system who are willing to do something similar. It's maybe idealistic, I don't know.
Time will tell, mate.
Time will tell.
I'm keen to zoom in maybe on some specifics a little bit. Pete, maybe I'll get you to share your thoughts on this. So actually, just earlier this week, I was on a webinar. We were discussing football and team sport in general, and about this idea of transitioning from amateur to professional level. In the case in golf or in team sports, it's from sort of the underage youth, top end of talent development into the professional game. So it's sort of guys and girls between 16 to 20 years of age, and you know, often how tough that transition is. So it sounds like there's a similar theme. So I'm interested in, if we were to come out and see these sessions you're putting on, what are we going to see? So you've talked about constraints and nonlinear pedagogy maybe being some of the theory that underpins it, but what would we come and see at these sessions? What are you guys actually doing?
What you would see, well, basically we try to create a practice environment that's representative of their tournament play and the emotions that emerge from that. We constrain the space of the golf course when we're out there. A community of practice. We're really kind of hammering home a community of practice as well, aren't we, Graeme? And behaviour. And what would you see? Graeme, could you step in there? What would?
The first thing you'd see is us as coaches not doing very much.
Yeah. So just to step in there, actually. So we've had a bit of feedback from players recently, and one of them said, you know, when do you coach to me? And I was like, all right, you know, when we were doing this, because they've come up in a very coach-led system, shall we say. And we're not saying much at all, are we, Graeme? We're just creating an environment and letting them get on with it, really. Stepping in.
One of the interesting questions that we ask, and I've been asking for a long time of the players in this, is, you know, at the end of the session, do you feel like you've been in a coaching session today? And typically the answer is no. And then you ask, do you feel like you learned anything today? Oh, learnt loads. You know, learnt loads and loads today. And I said, well, why is that not coaching then, guys? Because we created that learning opportunity for you today. You've learnt lots. You can go away. You can reflect. And it's just been really interesting getting over that point. There's a sense, because we're just standing back observing most of the time. Obviously, not to mention the considerable amount of time we've put in planning the day, and planning the sessions, and really just trying to get that right. And then we're standing back observing and really trying not to jump in, because we're wanting the guys to figure stuff out, but figure things out in such a way that directs them towards, you know, a more functional level of performance, and asking them to challenge themselves there, maybe change their approach. Not, you know, I also like to say to them, it's not always about changing what you've got, guys. Sometimes it's more about changing what you do with what you've got. Okay, and for golf, that can just be thinking about a different strategy, not playing a hole in the way that you would normally play it, but just figure out a way of getting this done. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is about. But yeah, you would see us doing not a lot. You would see the guys look very much from afar. You would, if you knew golf, and tournament golf, you would look at these guys and they would look like they're playing in a tournament. You know, it's got the same seriousness, the same concentration, the same frustrations. You would hear outbursts. People have just kind of lost it, you know, and sometimes you'd hear swearing. Sometimes you would see clubs getting, you know, smacked against the ground in frustration. You would see people celebrating a success, like they've, you know, just done something really good in a tournament. And that's kind of, these are the markers we're looking for all the time. And if we don't get that, then clearly it's not, you know, a representative environment. But yeah, I mean, I think what a lot of coaches come up and visit our sessions, and have to get over the fact that we're not in there that much. But we're kind of standing back watching the session, but we've spent a lot of time planning that session to try and get it just right.
And just to add, you know, it's 2 days a month we're doing at the moment, and generally we spend an hour each day kind of letting the guys create their own learning environment, and just occasionally just stepping in, asking them questions about, about the representativeness of what they've just put in there, so that they can go away, and it's far more important when they're away from us, the time that they're spending, practicing in a representative environment. And had a lot of feedback from that, Graeme, haven't we? Where the guys are now going off in pockets of 2-3 players in different areas and going practice and just doing it themselves,
And those, you've obviously been being able to elicit those pressures, emotions, anxieties that do come up in competition in practice, which is always seems to be quite elusive, and coaches' first response is normally, we can't recreate the competition pressure. Yeah. So I'm really interested in what constraints are you using and manipulating to create that challenge and that pressure, and see some of those responses.
Most of them, excuse me guys, most of them are what I call implied constraints. Okay, so if you think about, obviously we're all familiar with Neil's constraints model, but kind of going under the skin of that a bit more, and you've got structural constraints, functional constraints, implied constraints, etc. But in golf, and it might be different from team sports, but in golf you're typically out there on your own. Nobody's paying you. Okay, so you don't get paid unless you perform. Unlike football, for example, if you're part of a team, you've got a contract, you're going to get paid whether you win or lose. And in golf, nobody pays you unless you perform. So there's a lot implied by that. Okay, and that means that every time you hit a shot in golf, you know that something bad could happen from hitting that shot. That if all of a sudden you carve the ball out of bounds on the 18th, that there is something implied by doing that, and what might be implied is that you're going to miss the cut. And if you miss the cut in golf, so that might be the halfway point in the tournament, you miss the cut, that's it all over. You're going home and you've made a loss that week, and that loss could be several thousands of pounds depending on where you're playing in the world. So that as an informational constraint is something a golfer has in their environment all the time. So there's always something implied that, if a 3-putt here, so if I hit my first putt 5 feet past and I miss the next putt, what's implied by that? Well, quite a lot. And it could be implied that you've maybe lost the tournament, failed to get into playoff, missed a cut, put yourself into a really bad situation now. So our constraints typically are very implied, although we will manipulate spatial constraints. Sometimes we'll manipulate constraints that change the structure of the motor pattern. So try to do something that works on a structural constraint, but mainly it's implied constraints. So we set the tasks up so that they're always end directed in nature. The golfer's always trying to get to a point in time where they've either succeeded or they've failed. And every single shot leading towards that point, there is something implied by every single shot. So if you hit a bad shot in one of our constraint slide approaches, that will have an implied implication on your ability to complete the task. And in order to pressurize that somewhat more, if you fail the task, then it's likely that you're going to have to go and start the task all over again. Okay, so we tend to try and structure things around a 5.5 to 6 hour time frame, because that's the time frame of a professional round of golf, if you like, at the extreme level. Ideally, that would be 4 to 4.5 hours, but we try and train beyond that. So we'll say, well, if you come up short in this particular task, you're going to go again, and you can't leave this environment until 5.5 hours or 6 hours down the line. That in itself is quite stressful, knowing that I might have come up one shot short of being able to complete this task after 2 hours, then I'm going to have to be out here for another 2 hours to get to that point again, that I can walk over that line and be successful. Now, I might get to the point after 6 hours that they've come up short, full stop, and that's life and that's golf, but there should be a heck of a lot of learning involved in coming up short. It certainly shouldn't be something that's particularly easy to complete our tasks. So I don't know if that paints a picture or not, guys, of how we create that stress, but certainly the two components I would say that are crucial is that the task should be end directed in nature. Okay, goal directed, end directed, intentionality, if you like. There's a particular specific intention to the task, and also manipulate information in such a way that the constraints are implied in terms of every time I hit a shot, I know there's something implied by the outcome of this shot. Okay, and that's stressful, it's uncomfortable, but it's representative of the performance environment, because golfers have to live in that environment from the minute they hit their first shot to the second that they put the last shot away.
That's really useful, Graeme, and I can already feel the tension in that environment right now. I think one of the things I always look for in a good training environment, a good learning environment, is if people have got their game faces on. And I think you've given us a pretty good picture of golfers needing to put their game face on. I think one of the things I'm interested in then, you talked a lot about opportunities for learning in that context. Do you do anything to try and help them embed that learning? Do you follow up and interact with what they then take away and do in their own home environment? Pete, you talked about they get together in 2s and 3s to do more of their own work. Are you tracking that learning journey and trying to help embed that learning, or are they pretty much taking ownership of that?
Yeah, pretty much taking ownership of it. If I'm being honest, a few players have now come to me commercially, and I'm working with them through the back of this. So, you know, there's only so much time in a day that we can do this for free. So a lot of them are going off and just doing their own thing. A couple of them have come to me, and I'm helping them out in a more structured, well, not structured way, but yeah, really kind of informing their practice from day to day. You know, but and what I'm seeing from this, the players that I've spent over a year with now, they're doing it autonomously. They're, you know, like, they'll just say, "This is what I'm doing today, Pete. What do you think of it?" And then we'll discuss it. You know, so and again, Mark and I talked about periodization and the last time we spoke in Edinburgh about the flaws in that, and how, you know, I created an environment last year, and this is all about my learning experience, and Graeme and I have talked about this as well, but, you know, I created practice plans for a player for a week leading up to the tournament, or so it's 2 weeks before, and made it really, really pressurised and nasty. You know, she failed the task on the 35th hole. She's on the phone to me in tears. Now the next day, you know, I'd done it in a periodization kind of way. Next day, she was our training, the periodization was really, really tough, but I eased off the next day. And to me, having a constant communication with a player, even if it's they're creating their own learning environment, it's just seeing where they're at emotionally as well. However, you know, I spoke to a European Tour coach, and when I said that to him about eased off the next day, he was like, "Well, is that?" He said he would have done exactly the same thing, but he was saying, "Is that representative of the environment?" Because my guy, who's struggling to make the cut on the European Tour or keep his card, is having to go back out there after a poor round, you know, and is emotionally drained. So, you know, I'm still kind of playing about with that. It's maybe having a wee bit of empathy as well with the player, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think the things that we've tried to do is get feedback in terms of, you know, you mentioned monitoring the learning, and really getting the feedback about how it's transferring to the performance context, which is, it's obviously, that's everything, isn't it? I mean, if your program's absent of transfer or monitoring that transfer, then you know, your program's really weak, and that's the thing that's of most interest to us. Tell us about how you felt at the tournament, or the tournaments you've played in this year, and from certainly from my students down the years, we've had some really interesting stuff there. You know, where they turn up at a tournament and they feel somewhat like they've trained beyond the needs of this activity, that their training's been harder than the tournament, and you know, it brings this sort of sense of sort of contentment almost, where they don't feel as uncomfortable as they would have done previously, because the training's been fairly stressful. So we're kind of monitoring things in that way. But there's a lot of things that we haven't figured out, a lot of things we don't probably do that we should do. That only we will discover those things, I think, as we go down the line with this. That, you know, there's a lot of issues, a lot of problems. One of the issues I think that I've had over the years is players who are training in different philosophies. So they're coming along to train in our philosophy, but they're still training in their original philosophy, which has been interesting. I think one of the examples of it, this isn't a specific example with any of my guys, but what seems obvious with golfers, if you ask a golfer how they perform a skill on the golf course, 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, they'll say, I don't think about technique. Okay, it's all external. It's really just see the shot, hit it, and then you ask them, well, how do you practice? And the same amount will tell you it's almost all internal. So I'm going to go away and I'm going to practice, and I'm going to focus on positions and where my elbow should be, and these kind of things. And that's just an example of a kind of mixing philosophy. Well, you tell me that you want to play free of technical information, and yet you tell me when you practice, that's when you work on the technical stuff. And there's a lot we don't know there yet, I think.
Yeah.
In terms.
Just to add,
that just intuitively seems odd to me.
Just to add, we did actually get the guys a couple of months ago to just write what they've taken from our time together so far. And I'll just read out one of the emails that I got. This from Mike Patterson. I'm continuing to practice in this way. No practice time is wasted anymore. My practice is planned and goal-orientated, with the common goal to feel some pressure during sessions and complete my task. Feeling more comfortable being uncomfortable with every session. I'm noticing improvements with regard to my tournament scores already, and feeling a lot tougher out there. So that's the sort of information we're getting back from these guys.
And excuse me, I mean, Graeme, you mentioned it about monitoring, and I'm really interested in a framework, I guess, for you guys as coaches and your own decision making, this process of monitoring and adapting what you're doing, and how important it obviously is to get that information. So whilst it's early days, I guess, how would you sum up 2 areas? One is, how do you think the group is going with being their own learning designers, which from what I hear is what you sound like you work to. And then that second question, which, I mean, Pete's given one example of, what are you seeing transfer into competition?
Yeah, I would say, well, firstly, this group obviously we're just coming into the season, so the golf season won't kick off properly until next month. So they've come through this winter period. Some of the guys have been new to this philosophy, so we don't have specific information from them yet. But the biggest problem I'm experiencing is not necessarily what they're gaining from this program. It is when they're saying they're turning up at a tournament and saying, yeah, this is better, I feel more prepared, etc., etc., and then they underperform in that tournament. Okay, and it's trying to get our head around that. So they don't always underperform. Sorry, don't get me wrong, but they go away and underperform, and that's just human nature. I'm sure they do that, and all of a sudden, there's a tendency with golfers is to go back and start to re-engineer their golf swing. Okay, so I need to go and change something in my golf swing, and so for me, it's really just kind of the early stages of all this for us, in terms of trying to say to the guys, well, is that really the best thing you can do? Can we can we maybe look at that kind of thing? Peter, you'll still do a bit of work with golf swing, Pete, now and again. Is that right?
Yeah, but it's external focus. Yeah, I do. I do the commercial side of it, I suppose. Yeah, I still work with it, but I wouldn't say it's the standard golf lesson you would expect. It's all down kind of skill acquisition side of things, except in the winter it's non-representative. It's indoors, but I've got to make a living. To be quite frank.
Yeah. Coming back to your question there, Mark. Really, and talking about creating this framework of learning and whatnot, very, very early stages of all of that. I mean, so there's a lot we probably don't do that we should do, a lot that we don't know that we need to know in the future, because really and Pete, you're maybe a wee bit different to this, but my focus is just typically, let's create the environment and chuck them in. And obviously within that environment, players could have different goals because they're all maybe at different stages and different strengths and weaknesses, so we can manipulate things so it's very specific to the individual in that environment. But yeah, I've spent most of my time just focusing on creating those environments so that we get that right. The next stage of this, I don't really know what that is and what needs to be added. And I guess we get guided by the players, Pete, as we go with this. We need to kind of
absolutely, and even just add, we've we can't name name, but we've got a seasoned professional who's been on the European tour helping out with this as well now. So he's advising some of the players that are involved with us. He's played with a few of them now, playing with one regularly. And just to give you an example, I went and played with the pro and Ryan for the first time, and Ryan's aspiring to be a professional golfer as well. And it was fascinating to see when we played with him, and afterwards talking to Ryan in the car, and he was expecting the Tour Pro to hit it amazing and score and Tour Pro didn't. He hit it okay, but he still scored well, still managed to get the goal done. And Ryan, I think for his own learning experience, was just well, I'm not actually that far off, And it's getting what you see a lot in talent development. You guys have known far more than this, but what we see a lot in golf is you'll get a guy that's done it, or a Tour Pro, and he'll give them a talk for an hour or the day and hit golf shots on a driving range. To me, that's not. Kids aren't learning from that. Take them out on the golf course. Speak to them on the golf course. Let's see what he can do in the golf course and what emerges from that. Anyway, just.
Yeah, that's good point. And I think the less that we have to do, the better. And the less support we have to give, the better. And the less feedback or instruction we have to give, the better. Because clearly when you're out there and you're performing as a golfer, you don't have any of those things. It's not like football where you make a substitution and take the weak guy off. You can't substitute yourself, so to speak. And there's no half time, and there's no timeouts, and there's none of that. So try to chuck a framework up around these guys that gives them lots and lots of support. Might be the worst thing you can possibly do for them.
Yeah.
Because you've got to figure a lot of stuff out online as it's emerging, with whatever you has turned up on the day. Okay, so one of the interesting things we ask tour players when we get the opportunity is, how many weeks a year do you have your A game with you? And nobody's ever, and bear in mind, they might play 25 weeks of the year, tournament golf. Some might play 30 or more. Nobody's ever said more than 3 times in a year will they have their A game with them. And some have said no weeks of the year will we have our A game with us. So most of the time, they're having to make a living and survive with their B or their C game. So one of our goals of our sessions is to try and make sure we're keeping the player away from their A game, so they're having to learn how to perform in the moment with a less than optimal level of functioning. And then it also brings around this odd anomaly about practicing as well, because when a high-level golfer goes to the driving range to practice, they're practicing their A game. They're trying to optimize and maximize and perfect everything, even though they tell us when they go away and perform, their A game never shows up, which is a really odd anomaly, if you like. And we kind of try and suggest, well, why are you practicing your A game if it never shows up? Try and spend more of your time in situations that keep you away from your A game, so that when you're at a tournament, you've already practiced functioning to high level with suboptimal or your B game. So really, and again, if you come back and ask us in 10 years' time, it might be totally different. But at the moment, I'm trying to give them as little information or support other than that is what is implied by the environment. And if you want to stay in this environment and you want to be successful in this environment, you better figure a lot of stuff out and pretty quickly. Or this environment's not going to be for you, and you're going to leave this environment. Now that would be completely the wrong approach, but that's certainly my interpretation of its application. You're laughing. Does that seem right? You also look like you're sitting on a Swiss ball, Pete.
No, I'm not right, really. Well, stop. I'm not even going to comment on that, right? I'm laughing because just examples are coming to mind of the complete chaos sometimes that, the players that have come through a structured talent development and come into this. We've seen a few that have struggled in the first day, haven't they? They've really vividly, I remember a couple of guys that have played at a very high level came in 3-4 months ago, and they got annihilated for the first 2-3 hours, didn't they? And we didn't really say much, but they they adapted their decision making and movement. We talked to them. They, you know, we spoke to them. Nothing came out that was technically focused. It was all about decision making and making poor decisions when they were doing the constraints games. And yeah, it was fascinating to see. And then later on in the afternoon, they started to adapt their decision making and I suppose movement as well, and they started to have a little bit more success. Is that fair to say, Graeme?
Yeah, definitely. Things start to change. The environment forces that, demands that off you.
And they'd been practicing predominantly their A game. They'd never experienced a practice environment like this. You see that quite a lot, actually.
It's nice stuff. Graeme, you said check in 10 years. I think we might not leave it 10 years, but we definitely want to check in and see how you're going after a while. I think for me the most interesting thing about all of this is that what you're squarely focused on is, I guess, a couple of things. Is absolutely a golfer-centred approach, but I would describe it as also quite an implicit learning approach. And I find that really fascinating because we're so hooked these days on making sure that the learning's happened. And I'm not convinced you need to. I think there's some reflective tools that can be really helpful for a learner to think about what they're learning, but actually what you guys are doing is leaving them to figure that out, and it's a really interesting approach to take, so definitely keen to check in less than 10 years and see how that's going, but I think we should probably wrap it up for now unless you've got anything else.
No, I think that's good, guys. I appreciate you sharing that, and I think it stands out. We talk about learning a lot, and we've talked about the golfer as the learner, but clearly, and you guys have been honest enough to demonstrate that you're learning as you go as well, which I think is not always the case. That people are sometimes feel pressured to maybe pretend they have all the answers, particularly coaches. That we know. I think if you've coached for a little while, you know you really don't have the answers, and often you are feeling your way, and it's trial and error and all those things about learning as well as a coach, as well as a golfer or participant in sport. So just thank you very much, guys, for sharing that sort of journey so far. Early days, but looking forward to seeing where it takes you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate that.
Cheers, guys.
Right, cheers.
Cool.